What is going on, world? What's up, YouTube? It's Zero here. Today I'm bringing you guys a brand new episode of the 8 Below Show. Welcome everyone to 8 Below, the best gaming related show here on YouTube. And tonight's episode, we have a ton of stuff to talk about, so let's get into it. One of the first games I ever played on the PlayStation 3 was Resistance. I got Resistance, guys, and I believe Killzone 3 around the same time on PlayStation 3 when I first picked up the console. And Resistance, guys, was the first game I got my hands on the PS3. And I absolutely loved this game. I thought this was a great game, and between going back and forth between Resistance Fall of Man and Killzone 3, man, I had a lot of fun on my hands between those two games, two first-person shooters. And, you know, there was a lot of different things that were within the game that made it very unique. It kind of reminded me of Gears of War. It had also the ability to have first-person and as well as third-person within in the series. And so I want to talk about what happened to this franchise and where is Resistance 4, because this is a game that I've been waiting for quite some time after the original core trilogy. So let's talk about it. So guys, as I said, Resistance is a series of first-person shooter and third-person shooter video games, of course developed by Insomniac Games, and then of course was published by Sony Computer Entertainment. So when you look at this, obviously, these games came exclusively on PlayStation. And we had started off with Resistance Fall of Man, which came out in 2006, was a launch title for the system. And obviously, it kind of started off the Resistance trilogy. And then you had Resistance 2, which followed in 2008, a couple of years later. And a couple years after that, you had Resistance 3. So you had, the three games came out a couple of years after one another. And then after 2011, it just seemed like everything became very quiet with Resistance after 2011. And the game sold very well. And there was a lot of talks as to, are they going to make another Resistance game after that trilogy that they did? And of course they did other games, right? They did Retribution, which was released on the PlayStation Portable on March 17th, 2009. And then, of course, Resistance Burning Skies, which came out on PlayStation Vita, which I think didn't really do a lot of justice to the franchise. I don't think that they needed to be on, PlayStation Portable and PlayStation Vita. I would have liked to just see continuations of the franchise in other ways. But, for what it was, at least they kept making stuff, right, at the end of the day. And as far as the future is concerned for this franchise, according to Resistance 3 creative director Marcus Smith, the studio has a number of franchises it wants to pursue, and that Resistance is not one of them. It is possible that the franchise will be handed off to another developer. Insomniac CEO Ted Price stated that Insomniac won't be making any more Resistance games. On March 28, 2014, all online features of the Resistance games have been discontinued. And in August 2018, Insomniac's community director James Stevenson called chances of a Resistance 4 a long shot, revealing that neither the developer nor Sony, who owns the IP, were talking about a sequel. And then as of February 27, 2020, Resistance Fall of Man and Resistance 2 have not been released on the PlayStation Now. So I really think a lot of disservice is being done to this franchise as a whole. I mean, the fact of the matter is that they didn't even bring the Fall of Man as well as Resistance 2 onto the PlayStation Now. The question is, are they going to be bringing everything to the PS5 when that releases? But it just feels like to me that this is a really solid franchise, right? Sold really well. I personally think that, similar to Killzone, we talked about Killzone the other day, but I really think that these two franchises really deserve to continue. Why are they not continuing? And I think that Insomniac or Sony should definitely be passing the torch onwards to another developer, or Sony should just sell the IP completely and somebody else can pick it up. I mean, why not? I think that there's a really cool concept here, and sure, some of the games weren't as good. I would say the third one was not the best one. I would say that, definitely the first two were the most popular of the games, but all three of them did really well. So it's very strange to me to think that all of a sudden they just decide to drop this franchise and decide not to continue it. But that being said, guys, I think as far as where is a Resistance 4, it's in a limbo state, or it is completely on the back burner for Insomniac as well as Sony, which is a really unfortunate thing. I hope they decide to continue this franchise at some point or another. If you're a big Resistance fan, really what this comes down to, guys, is once again, this is another example of a series that we as a community have to tell the developers that we want another game, or at least want another developer to take the reins and give it a try, because it's better than not having any more content or any more, games in this franchise. I mean, they completely shut down all the online features for these games in 2014, which is a complete disservice. I mean, that's 3 years after Resistance 3 came out. They decide to shut all those things down. It's a really unfortunate thing, guys, and I think it's a real disservice to this franchise because it's, in my opinion, a really solid franchise. So let me know, guys, though, what would you guys want to see out of a Resistance 4? Do you want to see a direct continuation of the franchise? You want it to be like a prequel? Who do you want to take the reins of it? You want Sony to keep the IP, or do you want them to sell it? Let me know what you guys think about all those things in the comment section below. And for more Resistance 4 content and videos, stay here with Zero TV. Another PlayStation exclusive that has garnered so much praise amongst game developers and fans alike is Uncharted. And there's been a lot of questions ever since Drake's, of course, his story kind of was told within, of course, the first 4 Uncharted games. There's been a lot of talk and speculation as to what could come next in this franchise. So what we're going to talk about here today is what happened to Uncharted and what could the future look like for this franchise. So let's talk about it. In an article that was written by Heather Wald of Games Radar, 3 years after Nathan Drake's journey came to an end, we turn our thoughts to what could come next. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End came out 3 years ago and brought Nathan Drake and his treasure hunting days to a rather sweet end. Since then, we'd had the standalone spin-off Uncharted Lost Legacy with Nadine and Chloe joining forces with Nathan's brother Sam Drake. Now thoughts turn to where the series could go next. It's highly likely that we'll be seeing another core game in the series, but now that Nathan has settled down with the family, it'll most probably go in an entirely new direction. Naughty Dog are busy working on The Last of Us 2, and there's been no sort of official announcement about a new Uncharted game in the works. Still, it's natural to assume we'll see one in future that is given one of the most successful franchises for PlayStation. Since it's a pretty far off prospect at this point, we can probably bank on it being a next-gen title that'll land on the highly anticipated PS5. So, first of all, guys, I think the big thing here is that Naughty Dog, the developers who make Uncharted and have made all the Uncharted games up to this point, are working on The Last of Us 2. And it's taken them a long time, it feels like, to get The Last of Us 2 out. So I don't think that we're going to see an Uncharted 5 really anytime in the foreseeable future because of The Last of Us 2 and when that is going to be coming out, of course, May of this year. And then after that, they're going to be wanting to continue content and things of that nature for The Last of Us 2. So I'm saying that if they were to start working on an Uncharted 5, it's going to be probably a couple of years after The Last of Us 2 does release. And I'm sure they have ideas in the back of their head as to what an Uncharted 5 would look like. I would personally like something completely new. Whether that be, the new character that you play as has ties to Nathan Drake or to, other characters that were in the original 4 games. As far as the Lost Legacy goes, I thought that it was decent, but at the same time, there was nothing like playing as Nathan Drake in those first 4 games. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what they decide to do with that. If they somehow maybe decide to go back in time and play a very young Nathan Drake would be kind of interesting, even though we got some kind of a taste of that within Uncharted 4. But Back in April, Only SP interviewed Nathan Drake's voice actor Nolan North and asked about the potential for a fifth installment in the series. A lot of people want the fifth Uncharted, but that ship has kind of sailed, North said. Admittedly, this doesn't sound too optimistic, but this doesn't outright mean we won't ever see another game in the Uncharted world. Talking about A Thief's End, North said, it was a bittersweet end to the franchise, but we're proud of what we've made, and if that's the way that Sony and Naughty Dog decide to leave it, then I'm fine with that. The fourth installment played out like a fond farewell to the treasure hunter we'd filled his shoes for 4 games, but given how much they could do with the game's world and the wealth of established characters who could easily take us on a new experience, it's hard to imagine the series won't ever return in some way. So, once again, I think that, it sounds like Nathan Drake's story is definitely done, all in all. And the other thing is that you don't really want them to continue something and then they end up, almost trying to force like narratives and things in Uncharted 5, and then that ends up actually ruining the franchise or ruining the way we look at how perfect those first 4 games really were. I mean, I thought that, each one kept getting better and better as the series progressed, and if that's what it means, like, I would rather have just those 4 games in my memory, knowing that those were some of the best PlayStation experience games I've ever had, rather than a 5th one come out and it's not nearly as good as those first 4. That's just my personal take on it. And then with the news that the much talked about Uncharted movie starring Tom Holland as young Nathan Drake is finally coming out in 2020, the series is still very much on our minds. While we may not have any solid details about the next game, that doesn't stop us from wondering what it could be like and what we'd like to see in the next adventure. So after 4 games in the series with Nathan Drake as the leading man, we're more than ready to see a new lead character take us on an entirely different kind of Uncharted escapade. But who could it be? Well, in the epilogue of Thief's End, we are first introduced to Nathan and Elena's daughter, Cassie. Nathan and Elena agree to finally tell Cassie about their past, and the game comes to a sun-soaked end. Now that Cassie knows, surely it could perfectly set up a new adventure in her shoes. So I would be down with this. I think that this would be something that would be really interesting. It would kind of feel like we're picking right back up where we left off if they continued from the end of A Thief's End, and then maybe have Nathan Drake as kind of in the story, but he's a side character now. He's not necessarily the focal point. It's more, of course, you'd be playing, Cassie. And so I think that would be something that would be very interesting to see if they decided to go in that direction. We would love to see the next adventure be a little bit more innovative with the gameplay side of things. Lots of big action sequences and mechanics began to feel a little too familiar by the time we reached the end of the series. So it'd be great to see them try to bring something new to the table. So for me, at least, I thought that, between all of these games, I thought that they just kept getting better. The action sequences, mechanics, I thought they just kept getting better as each game went. I thought that at first with A Thief's End in that 4th game, at first it kind of felt like, it's kind of been here, done that. But then as the game progressed, I would say in the second half of the game, it felt like it was just completely new, just kept getting better and better. And that's just my personal take on it. I can see why other people would want like the gameplay to be shaken up, but I think the gameplay as it is what made the series so great in the first place. So we've seen a lot of new locations throughout the Uncharted series, from the Amazon rainforest in the first Uncharted to Istanbul in Uncharted 2, London in Uncharted 3, and Madagascar in A Thief's End. Journeying to new locations really does make everything feel new and exciting, so we'd love to see the next game set in an entirely new location that presents unique challenges. I'd like the next one to be in another city, guys. That would be like my personal take. It would be kind of cool to have it in the US somewhere, like Vegas or somewhere of that nature. I think that they could maybe do some really cool things. There is something about like the jungles and the rainforest and such. It kind of feels a lot like an Indiana Jones or something. So that's why I think that would be something that would be really, really cool. Also, we would like to see multiplayer make a return. Of course, most players get Uncharted for the single-player experience, but the multiplayer side of things became a much-loved part of the franchise. In fact, Naughty Dog recently announced it's only just about to bring online support for Uncharted 2 and 3 on the PS3 to an end this September. A Thief's End offered up a variety of modes and maps that are great fun to play with a group of pals. Regardless of if or how the next installment shapes up, we'd love to see them build on multiplayer and see it return in style. And I agree with that. I would love to see, I mean, look, I've said this on so many occasions. I love full package games where you have a great single player story, but you also have other ways that you can reconnect with the franchise, that being like multiplayer, co-op modes, and things of that nature. So, Uncharted, guys, you know, what happened here? So we had one of the greatest runs that we've seen from a narrative perspective in, you know, gaming history. Uncharted was 4 games that seemed every single game just kind of took it up a notch every time, and it did such a good job of that. I felt that Naughty Dog, this was a series that really put them on the map as a real contender for one of the best, you know, game developers in the world. And then, of course, with The Last of Us coming out, Naughty Dog is trying to make a case without a doubt. And then, of course, with The Last of Us 2 coming out, that's going to be really interesting as well. But I think that ultimately what happened, they wanted to end the experience. And I think the same will be said for The Last of Us. They're going to want to end that experience as well. And they want to end it on good notes. They don't want it to be something where it feels like they're just trying to continue it to consistently do some money grabs. And I think that with Uncharted, they might end up coming back to it. Though there's a chance that they may never come back to Uncharted ever again. And Sony may say they want to sell the IP to someone else, or they want to give kind of move that IP to a different development team. I don't think Naughty Dog would allow that to happen. But at the same time, if no one's making it, people are going to want a continuation of the Uncharted games because of how good they were. So personally, guys, I think that ultimately, that's what happened with Uncharted. It was such a great run. Lost Legacy was kind of, in my opinion, that was kind of like the weakest of all of the games. I kind of wish that wasn't the last impression you had of Uncharted. I would have much rather had, you know, Lost Legacy like before Uncharted 4, and then Uncharted 4 was like the last, you know, memory that you have. But nonetheless, A Thief's End was incredible, and I'm excited to see if an Uncharted 5 does come out at some point or another in the future. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. What would you guys want to see from an Uncharted 5? Would you want to see a continuation in one way, shape, or form from Uncharted 4, or would you want something completely new? Let me know what you guys think, and for more Uncharted 5 content and videos, stay here with Zero TV. Another game that I would love to see a return of at some point or another, even though it looks at this point that most likely we're not going to get a return to this franchise, is Haze, guys. A franchise that, and really just a single game that was made on the PlayStation 3, and due to a number of different issues, of course, between not only the reviews of this game that were very, very poor reviews, maybe a huge missed opportunity here, but nonetheless, I actually thought that the experience was a lot of fun, but I guess, you know, it doesn't really come down to just one person thinking it was a lot of fun and hoping for a, you know, continuation of the franchise. I want to talk about what happened to this franchise. And so, guys, Haze, for those of you who don't remember, it was a first-person shooter game that was developed by Free Radical Design. It was published by Ubisoft for the PlayStation 3. It was released in May of 2008, guys, for Xbox 360, the releases for Xbox 360 and Microsoft Windows were actually canceled, which I also think might have hurt the game kind of in the long run as well. But nonetheless, guys, so it was made, of course, brought out 2008, and then the modes, it had a single player and a multiplayer mode. Now, what I will say is this. It's a first-person shooter, another one of those first-person shooters that I think had a lot of potential. It looked like people were calling it the Halo killer. People actually thought that this could be something huge. And then, of course, had a very short single-player campaign, which I agree, definitely had a very short single-player campaign. The multiplayer, though, was great in my opinion. But overall, guys, I think what happened to this franchise was the reception. If you look at all of the different feedback, the reviews and such, it's pretty abysmal, and it's something that really did not do very well whatsoever across many different review sites, that being like Metacritic, Eurogamer, even IGN, Giant Bomb. Prior to release, Haze garnered considerable attention. Some media sources deemed it a Halo killer. However, upon release, the game received mixed reviews according to the review aggregation website Metacritic. Poor reviews included Giant Bomb, which gave it a negative review, largely due to its many glitches and extremely short single-player campaign. Eurogamer called it this year's most significant gaming disappointment. Jeff Haynes of IGN criticized the horrible plot, weak gameplay mechanics, and visuals that are truly underwhelming. Tons of visual issues abound within the game, from texture tears and nondescript environments to pop-in and odd animation problems. Greg Damiano of Game Revolution cited examples of bland gameplay and graphics and blistering sound, and commented that the main character, Shane Carpenter, whines and pouts all through the campaign. So look, guys, what it really comes down to is that there was so much bad reception around this game that I actually think that's what really hurt this game significantly, because I really felt that they had something special here in this game. I really do. I believe it to this day. A very interesting concept that just was either like, all in all, I feel like it was just not developed like fully. Like, it was kind of, the single player campaign especially was very short, but what are people going to come back to? People are going to come back to that multiplayer experience, and because of like glitches and things of that nature, I just think a lot of people moved on to like other games. They were just playing other stuff like Call of Duty and a number of other games out there, because of all of the issues that this game had between not only single player but also the multiplayer experiences. So now, more generous reviews were also somewhat disappointed. Kevin Van Ord of GameSpot said, "This madly inconsistent shooter offsets a number of thrilling moments with terrible artificial intelligence and an awful story, and a 7-hour campaign and uneventful multiplayer modes just don't cut it in light of the far better modern shooters available on the market." And that's really what I think hurt this game, guys. There was a bunch of other games out there that pretty much kind of stole a lot of those, people who were even considering playing Haze. That being like Resistance, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, Unreal Tournament 3. It's one of those things that there were just other games, guys, that people were going to when they saw how buggy this game was. I just think it was a missed opportunity. Similar to like a game like Evolve, guys. Evolve was a different type of game, and it had a lot of potential to it. And we've seen so many games now that have come out that have taken concepts from Evolve. Evolve just so happened to be that game that didn't do very well. It was almost like behind its time, or it was ahead of its time technically, but at the same time, it was almost like something so new that it was kind of the first failure in that space. And I think Haze, not that it was the first of its kind, but it had some very interesting ideas, and they didn't land very well. And so all in all, guys, I think at the end of the day, I think that really what happened to this game wasn't so much that, it was a horrific experience or something. It was just the reception was so bad. In 2015, The Guardian nominated Haze as one of the 30 worst video games of all time, noting that despite having an interesting concept, it was a hollow disappointment. The plot was impenetrable, and the characters laughable, and the single-player campaign judderly short. So, look, I'm not going to say it's one of the 30 worst video games of all time. That is ludicrous. I mean, I thought it was pretty good for what it was. It was certainly not one of the 30 worst all time. I thought that sometimes it feels like when there's a lot of people piling on bad reception and bad reviews, it just continues, and it's like a snowball effect, and you have so many bad reviews on something that really wasn't that bad. Sure, bugs and things of that nature, but even think about a game like No Man's Sky that had tons of bugs and so many issues, but they updated them and continued to support it. And then after a while, now look at where it's at. One of the best comeback stories. I wish we could have had that with Haze, because I would have liked to see a continuation of this franchise. I don't know, guys, if you're a massive fan of this franchise, I don't know if we're ever going to get a continuation of it, unfortunately. I don't think that we will, because of this bad reception. And if they did, it probably would come out on PlayStation. I mean, maybe on Xbox and on Windows. I would hope so, but it's hard to say at this point. But I want to know from you guys. Let me know in the comment section below. Did you like Haze if you played it? And would you like to see a continuation of the Haze franchise moving forward, like a second chance, a second life? Kind of like some of these other games that we have talked about, like, Evolve 2. Would you want to see another Evolve game? Well, let's talk about Haze. Would we want to see another Haze title brought out and given, a second breath of fresh air? Let's talk about that. And I hope you guys will kind of have like real conversation about it and kind of be open-minded, right? That we can have these real conversations, whether we're talking positive, negative. I want to hear everything, but would you want to see a continuation of this franchise? Like I said, let me know in the comment section below. And for more Haze videos and content, stay here with Zero TV. And with that being said, everyone, I hope you guys did enjoy this episode of the 8 Below Show. And if you guys did, leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, stay positive, and as always, I'll talk to you guys all in the next one. Peace.